Hi everyone, it's Lisa here for Honeybee Stamps. Thanks for joining me for another card video. So today I'm sharing the new United We Stand stamp and coordinating honey cuts. Plus I'm going to be sharing an ink blended background technique with you. So this is the original card I created using this set, and today I'm going to share an upgraded version of this with you. We will talk a little bit about the United We Stand stamps and honey cuts a little later in the video. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have a 5" by 5" piece of 80-pound smooth cardstock laid out here in front of me. I've used a piece of inexpensive scrap paper here to create a homemade stencil, and this is just a ray of light, where that's what we're using this for. So just draw you a ray of light and cut it out, and that's what we're going to use. Once you have your ray of light cut out, go ahead and trace it onto some masking paper and cut those out as well. I have mine sitting there to the left. Also, we're going to be using the cloud stencil from the Outdoor Scene Builder stencil set. I'm going to add purple tape to the top and bottom of the stencil. It's going to hold it in place while I'm using it. Plus, it's going to make it a little bit more durable so it doesn't rip while I'm using it, since it is cheap paper. So I'm getting started. I'm going to position the stencil so that the rays start in the top left corner and cascade down toward the bottom. Now, when you position the stencil, be mindful of where you want the rest of the rays to be placed. I recommend taking your time and playing around with the positioning a little bit before you start adding ink. So I have mine in position and secured. I've grabbed a blender brush and I'm using a yellow dye ink, and I'm going to lay down a very light layer of ink doing this. You don't want to be heavy-handed with this at all. I'm going to reposition this and I'm going to add more ink. I'm going to do 4 rays total on my card panel. Now, when I'm doing backgrounds where I'm layering inks on top of each other, I find I get the best results with dye inks. For me, I think it's a crisper look when you use dye inks. But I suppose you could try it with pigment inks if you wanted, but you would have to wait long periods for that pigment ink to dry completely before you could move on to the next step. So we're going to go ahead and mask off those rays, and then we're going to grab that cloud stencil. Now I'm going to be using 2 shades of blue dye inks. One is a very dark, like a navy ink, and the other is more of a royal blue. And you can use any dye inks you have, any shades of blue you want. It's completely up to you. I'm just showing you how I go about doing this, but you could do it with any colors you wanted to. You could do a rainbow of cloud and the rays, and that would be really pretty too. So the trick to this for me is when I'm doing these clouds, I don't work in a circular motion. I push the brush down onto the stencil, pushing it forward and lifting it up as I do that. And what this does, it creates a very sharp, dark line on the edge of the stencil, and then it lightens the ink as I'm pulling up and away from the stencil. So it's down, forward, up. And that's all I'm doing here. Now, I started with the darkest blue on the top, and then as I started progressing down the panel, I changed over to the brighter blue. And I got to a point about halfway in the panel where I was not even pulling ink from the ink pad. I was just using the ink that was left on the stencil. One thing I want to emphasize is you want the center of your panel to stay as light as possible. So just keep that in mind the whole time you're working with it. So we're coming in with a black dye ink now, and we're going to ink up the edges of this panel. I know it's kind of scary, but trust me, it's gorgeous when we're done. So once we lay down a little bit of that black ink all the way around that panel, then we're going to come in with our dark blue ink and go over that. And with both of these inks, we're starting with a heavy pressure on the edge and then lightening that pressure as we move in towards the center a little bit. So you're fading that ink out. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding this blue ink around the edges, and then we're going to do the reveal. So here's our rays. So the next thing that I want to do is you can see how I've taken that stencil and I've lined it back up with the clouds we had already stenciled. Very important to do that. I'm coming back in and adding more blue ink. So I'm laying some ink down on my stencil and then working it out over the rays. And I'm really trying to just stay in the area where the rays are. And you're wanting to keep this light. You don't want to go heavy with your ink over those rays. But what we're doing is we're laying down more ink to make it look like the rays are coming through the clouds instead of just laying on top of them. So I'm going to go around the edges as well and add some more blue ink to this. I'm also going to come in with my black ink because the top here, it needs to be darkened up. You don't want the rays to look like they're laying on top of the clouds. You want that illusion that those rays are coming through the clouds. So we need to cover up the start point of that ray, of those rays. So I come in with my black ink again and I go over that top left panel and then I just touch up around the edge of each. And then you're going to see me come back in with this blue ink one more time and do some final touching up on that. So the next step, I am going to be using some white pigment ink. And I'm using the edge of my scrap paper, as you can see. What I want to do is I'm laying down that scrap paper parallel to each of the rays. And then I'm going to cut, and I have it offset just a little bit. I don't have it lined up directly to the edge. It's offset a bit. And I'm going to come in with that white pigment ink and go add that ink over the rays and off the edge of my scrap paper. And what's going to happen is it's going to create more rays for us. So when you look at rays coming through the clouds, the transparency of each ray is different. So the white ink is going to give us the illusion of more rays, different shades coming through those clouds. So I started on the left side of the ray, worked my way all the way around all of them, and I'm going to come back and do the same on the right side of each ray. Now, once we have the rays finished, we're going to come back in with our black ink and our blue ink one more time just to cover up the edges and that top left corner because, again, we want those rays to appear as if they're coming through the clouds, not laying on top of the cloud. Quick look at the United We Stand stamp set and coordinating honey cuts. I love this set. Has some really great sentiments in it. The stripes are one stamp, making it super easy for us to use. The honey cuts, you're going to get this rectangle. That's the base. You get the stripes. You're also going to get the Union part of the flag, which is the section with the stars. I've run all those pieces through my die cut machine using red, white, and blue cardstock. And we're going to go ahead and start to assemble these. I'm just stacking them on top of each other with a liquid adhesive. Now, if you watch the Instagram or Facebook Live Sunday, I do believe it was Sunday evening, you probably saw Kelly using the set in the live. And she showed you how you could take the stripe stamp set, use a very light ink, and stamp it onto the base so you could line up your stripes if you die cut them, which has to be much easier than what I did, which was create a template by die cutting one of the bases out with the stripes. And then all I'm doing is coming in, adding glue, and laying the stripes into that template. Once I have all the first layer of those stripes in, I remove the template because then I know exactly where my stripes are going. But I really do think that the stamping those stripes is probably a lot easier. So just a sec, there's just another option if you wanted to try it that way. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish putting the flag together. Then we're going to set it aside and let it dry. Now I've placed the background in my MISTI. I'm going to add anti-static powder to it, and I'm going to stamp America the Beautiful with Versamagic ink in the bottom right corner. Now I'm going to repeat that stamping a couple of times because I would rather take the steps now to ensure the end result is amazing instead of coming back in and stamping it again, or even worse, starting completely over. So you're going to see me stamp this 3 times. I'm going to add super fine silver embossing powder. Make sure I have a nice coverage. I always take the time to clean off any stray specks of embossing powder. And then I'm going to come in with a preheated heat gun and go ahead and heat set this. So I'm going to use liquid adhesive to add the flag to the background. I'm going to center this background onto a 5.5-inch square Desert Storm card base. And for the final touch, I ran some silver glitter cardstock through my die cut machine with the Honey Cut Square thin frame die and added that to the card with liquid adhesive as well. And I do believe that's going to bring us to the end of the video. I really appreciate you joining me today. I hope you'll click the subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified of new content to the channel. Now, for more information about the products used, head over to the Honeybee Stamps website. And I hope you have an amazing day.